The vote was already decided before I raised my hand. I knew it. The 14 other delegations knew it. The chamber AI that recorded everything in real time knew it. We all sat inside that hall like actors in a play where the ending had been printed in the program, and the audience had already gone home, and the lights were still on because no one had bothered to switch them off. My name is Mara Voss. I am, or was, depending on who you ask, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. I had held that seat for 11 years. I had voted in 214 sessions. I had lost 214 times. This was session 215. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council sat at the center of Station Velareth, a structure so enormous it had its own weather systems in the lower decks. The ceiling above the main floor was 2 kilometers high. Architects from 6 species had designed it over 400 years, and every single one of them had made the same choice, whether by accident or intention. The human delegation's platform sat lower than every other. Not by much. 11 centimeters, according to the survey I had quietly commissioned in my 3rd year here. 11 centimeters lower, every session, every vote. I had never mentioned it to anyone. The Keth expansion resolution was being presented by Ambassador Velsaris of the Verath, who had a voice like polished stone and a manner that made every sentence feel like a compliment and a dismissal at the same time. The resolution proposed a new trade corridor through the Outer Rim. It would benefit 7 member species. It would run directly through 4 human colony worlds, cutting their independent shipping routes, forcing them into Verath-regulated lanes, quietly strangling their economies over the next 2 decades. It was all perfectly legal. That was the part that wore you down over time, not the cruelty of it, the tidiness. Velsaris finished speaking. The chamber's overhead system chimed that clean, pleasant sound, the same every session, a single soft tone that meant the vote was open. I had been listening to that chime for 11 years. It had never once hesitated. It did not care what it was opening the door to. I pressed my panel. Against. The results came back in 4 seconds, 14 in favor, 1 against. The chime sounded again to confirm the resolution had passed. Same tone, same clean, pleasant frequency, like it was announcing the arrival of a train. I sat for a moment and looked at the confirmation text on my panel, green letters. Resolution 719 Keth approved. Below it in smaller text, the names of 4 colony worlds whose shipping futures had just been redirected. Callaway Station, Port Inns, New Galveston, The Reach. I had been to New Galveston once. They had a bakery there. The woman who ran it had a daughter who wanted to study xenobiology. I do not know why I thought of that right then. The chime faded. Around me, the chamber began the soft procedural shuffling that followed every vote, delegates checking messages, aides leaning in to whisper, the HFY delegation already moving on to the next item on the agenda. Business as usual. The galaxy turning on its well-oiled hinges. Ambassador Velsaris leaned across the dividing rail between our platforms. Up close, the Verath had a quality that was hard to name, something between elegance and the absolute certainty that elegance was all that mattered. Ambassador Voss, she said. Her voice carried the warmth of someone who had practiced warmth for a long time. Humanity will adapt. You always do. I looked at her. I thought about what to say. I had a list assembled over 11 years of things I never said in that chamber. Of course, I said. She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to her aides. I stood. I walked through the chamber at normal speed because running would have been noticed and I was not ready to be noticed yet. I passed the Hume delegation, 4 of them, ancient and still, like furniture that had developed opinions. I passed the HFY block, already deep in the next agenda item. I passed the exit corridor, turned left, and pushed open the door to the delegate washroom. It was empty. I stood at the sink and ran the water cold and looked at myself in the mirror. There is a thing you do in diplomatic work with your face. You learn it early. You practice it until it becomes automatic. It is not a smile, exactly, it is more like a setting. A neutral position that reads as pleasant from a distance and communicates nothing up close. I had worn that setting for 11 years. I looked at it in the mirror. I thought about the Verath quarantine. I did not let myself think about it often. 400,000 people on 3 colony stations told they were a biological risk to surrounding systems. A council vote, legal and procedurally clean, had made that call. Earth had appealed, lost, appealed again. The quarantine had lasted 19 months. By the time it was lifted, quietly, with no formal apology on the grounds that the threat assessment had been revised, the damage was already done. I had not been ambassador then. I had been an aide watching from further back. 400,000 people. I looked at my face in the mirror. Then I took the diplomatic setting off. Not dramatically. I just stopped holding it. Like putting down something you have been carrying so long you stopped feeling the weight, and then you put it down, and the absence of it is the strangest thing you have ever felt. I stood there for a moment with just my own face. Then I took out my comm, opened a direct channel to Secretary General Owen Price in Geneva, and waited for the connection. It took 9 seconds. "Mara," he said. He sounded like he had been sleeping, though it was midday in Geneva. He had the voice of a man who had learned to sound calm about things that were not calm. "Owen," I said, "I am going to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I am not asking. I am informing." A pause. "Go ahead." "We are leaving the Galactic Council." The silence on the line had a specific texture. Not shock, exactly. More like a man who has been watching a glass slide toward the edge of a table for a very long time and has just heard it hit the floor. "Permanently," he said. "Permanently." Another silence. Then when? "I am filing the notice in the next hour. The process does not exist yet because they never built one. I am going to invent it." Owen Price did not speak for a long moment. I heard him exhale. I heard, faintly, what might have been a chair. "All right," he said finally. "Just that, all right." I closed the channel. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. Then I walked back out into the corridor, past the Hume delegation, past the Eschari block, past the voting console with its pleasant confirmation chime, and I sat back down at the human platform, 11 centimeters lower than everyone else, and I began to type. The withdrawal notice took me 22 minutes to write, because I had to draft the procedural mechanism as well as the notice itself. There was no template. There had never needed to be one. I built it from scratch, using standard council parliamentary language, filling in the sections that did not exist with language I invented on the spot. It was, from a technical standpoint, the most creative writing I had done in 11 years. I filed it at 14:33 station time. The chime sounded to confirm receipt. Same tone, same clean, pleasant frequency. This time it felt different, not because the chime had changed, because I had stopped needing it to mean anything. Outside the chamber's viewport, the stars were exactly where they had always been. 14 civilizations were about to discover that the variable they had built their system around had just stopped being variable. I straightened my jacket. I had a bakery to think about in New Galveston, a woman with a daughter who wanted to study xenobiology. I thought, let's see what we can do about that. Part 2. The news broke before I reached the docking bay. I know this because my aide, a 26-year-old from Edinburgh named Colin Reed, was waiting for me at the bay entrance with the look of a person who has just watched a bridge collapse and is still deciding whether to call it a disaster or an engineering event. "The feeds are running it," he said. "Of course they are. All of them, even the Hume channels, and those haven't updated since last cycle." I took my bag from him and kept walking. "What are they calling it?" "The Verath are calling it a procedural irregularity." "That's generous." "The Eschari are calling it a diplomatic tantrum." "That's accurate." "The Hume channels just have your filing number and no commentary." I stopped walking. They know the filing number. Colin nodded, with the expression of someone who found this deeply unsettling, but was trying to be professional about it. I found it interesting. The Huam were the oldest species in the council. By a margin so large the other 12 preferred not to think about it too carefully. They moved slowly, spoke rarely, and had never, in the 11 years I had observed them, appeared to notice anything that did not directly concern the long geological business of being very old and very certain. The fact that they had pulled my filing number and put it on their public channels within 40 minutes of submission meant something. I did not know what yet. I filed it in the back of my mind next to other things I was not done with. We boarded the freighter, the Corvin, a mid-range human cargo ship I had requisitioned for exactly this kind of exit, on the theory that leaving the most consequential diplomatic moment in human history on a council shuttle would have been undignified. The Corvin was not glamorous. It smelled like recycled air and the reconstituted noodle packets the crew favored, and the common room had a viewport that rattled faintly when the engines were at three-quarter thrust, and I had never been happier to be on a ship in my life. I sat in the common room with a bowl of noodles I did not particularly want and pulled up every available feed on my personal screen. The galaxy, it turned out, had a great deal to say about what I had done. The Varath Council block had issued a formal statement within the first hour, calling the withdrawal notice procedurally unprecedented and legally ambiguous, which was true on both counts. Their secondary statement, released 20 minutes later, walked back the legal ambiguity claim and replaced it with requiring review, which told me their legal team had actually read what I filed and discovered, to their displeasure, that I had been thorough. The HFY, who prided themselves on reading political temperature before acting, had put out nothing official yet. What they had done, according to Colin, who was monitoring their internal frequency chatter, was talk. A great deal. Their diplomatic channels were running at 4 times normal volume. I ate a noodle. On the main public feed, a panel of 3 alien commentators and 1 human, a man named Derek Holt who wrote for a Galactic Affairs outlet and who I had met twice and found roughly as useful as a weather forecast, were discussing the withdrawal with the energy of people who had been waiting for a large story and were now almost embarrassingly pleased to have one. Derek Holt was saying that the withdrawal was likely a negotiating tactic, that Earth would return to the table within 60 days, that the human political structure did not have the coherence to sustain a break of this magnitude. I made a mental note to never give Derek Holt a quote again. The other panelists, a Varath analyst and a HFY academic, both agreed with him in the tone of people agreeing with something they hoped was true. I switched to Earth domestic feeds. This was louder. Earth's parliament had gone into emergency session. 3 major party leaders had issued competing statements, one calling it courageous, one calling it reckless, one calling it both, which was the most honest of the 3. The public commentary was a genuine democracy in full operation, which meant it was enormous and contradictory and running in approximately 40 directions at once. A trending poll had 73% of respondents saying they supported the withdrawal in principle. 22% said they were uncertain. 5% said they wanted to rejoin immediately. Owen Price had given a 2-sentence statement confirming that the withdrawal was official and that further details would follow. 2 sentences. The man had a gift for communicating everything through what he did not say. I switched feeds again. On a Varath entertainment channel, not news, entertainment, someone had already made a short comedic piece about the human withdrawal. It featured a small animated figure of a human stomping out of a very large room and then standing alone in a corridor looking confused. It had 14 million views. I watched it twice. The animation was actually well done. The Corvin's common room filled gradually over the next hour. My small team, Colin, a technical analyst named Priya Watts, and our security coordinator, A man of very few words named George Albright settled in around me, each working their own screens, the collective silence of people who had just done something irreversible and were now in the phase of understanding exactly how irreversible it was. I was on my second bowl of noodles when my screen lit with a priority request. The HFY ambassador, SSK Thuris, requesting a private channel. I looked at the timestamp. It had been 6 hours and 14 minutes since I filed. I accepted, opened audio only, and leaned back. Ambassador Voss, said SSK Thuris. He had a voice that always sounded slightly rehearsed, like he had run it through a quiet room before sending it out. I hope this reaches you at a reasonable time. It does, I said, Ambassador. I will be direct. He paused, which was how the HFY indicated they were about to be indirect. There is significant concern within the Council regarding this development. Several member delegations have asked me to, informally, reach out. Which delegations? The concern is broadly shared. That is not what I asked. A beat, all of them, he said. I set down my noodles. I would like to suggest, SSK Thuris continued, a meeting, informal, no record, a conversation between colleagues. I thought about the 41 breaking news chyrons I had counted on the Verath feed, each one about humanity, each one cycling through with that same frantic energy, like a pulse that had forgotten how to slow down. Of course, I said, I will send my team's availability. Thank you, Ambassador Voss. The Council values Earth's participation very much. I know, I said. I closed the channel. Priya looked up from her screen across the table. She had that particular expression she wore when she was deciding whether to say a thing. He called, she said. He called. 6 hours. 6 hours and 14 minutes. Colin set down his own screen. Does that seem fast to you? I looked at my noodles, then at the viewport where stars were doing what stars did, burning, steady, indifferent, the same as always. Yes, I said, and that is the most interesting thing that has happened today. George Albright from his corner did not look up from his screen. He said nothing. He was very good at his job. I pulled up my personal log and typed one line, no preamble, no timestamp, nothing for the official record. They are scared. I did not expect that part to feel so quiet. Then I finished my noodles and went to find somewhere to sleep on a ship that smelled like recycled air and turned out humanity. Somewhere in a galaxy that was suddenly trying to figure out what we were going to do next. I was not going to tell them yet. I needed to figure it out myself first. Outside the rattling viewport, the stars did not care about any of it. They had been burning for billions of years before the Galactic Council existed. They would burn for billions more after it was gone. I found that, for the first time in a long time, genuinely comforting. Part 3. Neutral Station, Orvin, did not look like a place where anything important happened. That was, I suspected, the entire point. It sat at the junction of 3 minor trade lanes in a system with no habitable planets and no strategic value that anyone had ever documented publicly. It had a functioning docking bay, a conference level, a small cafeteria that served 6 species food with adequate competence, and the general atmosphere of a waiting room that had been waiting for a long time. SSK Thuris was already there when we arrived. He had come with 2 aides, which meant he had come with the minimum possible footprint while still maintaining the appearance of someone who had not come alone, because coming alone would have looked desperate. I had come with Colin and Priya, which was also the minimum footprint while maintaining the appearance of someone who did not need a large team to feel safe. We were both performing modesty for the same reason. The conference room was small, 8 chairs around a round table, no raised platforms, no 11-centimeter differentials. I noticed this. I did not mention it. SSK Thuris opened with flattery. He was very good at it. He spent 6 minutes telling me that my 11 years of service to the Council had been distinguished, that Earth's voice had always been valued, that the relationship between humanity and the galactic community was one of the great partnerships of the current age. I let every word land on the table between us and sit there. When he finished, I said, "What do you actually need?" He adjusted in his seat. The Eschari had a subtle physical tell when their rehearsed conversation went off script, a slight lateral shift of the shoulders, like a recalibration. SSK Thuris did it now. "The Council," he said carefully, "would like to invite Earth to reconsider the withdrawal." "I understood that from your channel request," I said. "I am asking what you actually need." Another shoulder shift, stability. "Whose?" He looked at me for a long moment. I had the sense of a man calculating something, working out whether honesty was a risk or a tool in this particular moment. Then something in his expression settled, and I understood he had decided. "The Council's," he said, "all of it." I folded my hands on the table and waited. What came next, SSK Thuris did not deliver as a speech. There was no drama in it. He spoke the way a person speaks when they are tired of holding something heavy and have found someone they think can handle the weight. He told me about the coalition structure. The Council ran on 3 major blocks, each containing 4 or 5 member species, each held together by overlapping trade agreements, shared resource access, and the agreement, never written down anywhere, never formally acknowledged, that the system was fair because it treated every member equally. The human seat, he said, was load-bearing in a way that had never been explained to us. Not because of our votes, we lost those. Not because of our resources, though those mattered, because of our presence. The argument that the Council was equitable rested on the existence of a species that had less power than the others and still remained at the table. As long as humanity was there, losing votes, staying anyway, the system could be pointed to as something that worked even for the smallest voice. The moment humanity left, 2 of the 3 coalition blocks lost the foundation of that argument. Without the argument, the blocks began renegotiating. Without the blocks, 2 of the largest resource conflicts in the Outer Rim, conflicts that had been papered over with diplomatic language for 30 years, had no containing structure. Earth was not the voice at the table, SSK Thuris said. Earth was the proof that the table was worth sitting at. I sat with that for a moment. We thought we were the bottle, we were the cork. I did not say that out loud. Some things are worth keeping. You need us to come back, I said, not for our vote, for our presence. The Council would be willing to revisit the Keth resolution, he said. Terms could be renegotiated. I am authorized to offer. I am not asking about terms, I said. I am asking if I understood you correctly. He was quiet. Yes, he said, that is correct. I nodded. I said I would need 48 hours to consider. This was a lie of a specific kind, not the kind that deceives, but the kind that gives both sides room to breathe, which is sometimes the more useful thing. We shook hands, 4 fingers to 5, and I left the room at the same pace I had entered it. In the corridor, I passed a viewport and stopped. Below, close enough to see the grid of lights, was New Galveston. I had not known we would pass it on this route. Colin had not mentioned it, or perhaps he had not known either. It sat in the middle distance, quiet and gridlit, the kind of view that looks small from up here and is enormous from inside it. I put my hand flat against the glass. It was cold. The cold moved up through my palm and into my wrist, and I kept my hand there and looked at those lights and thought about 400,000 people from 11 years ago who had trusted that the table was worth sitting at. And about a woman in a bakery with a daughter who wanted to study xenobiology. And about 11 centimeters. I kept my hand there until the cold became a steady ache. Then I kept it there a little longer. Then I lowered it and turned away from the viewport and walked back to my team. Colin was waiting. He handed me a coffee without being asked, which was one of the genuinely useful things about Colin. Well, said Priya. They needed us there, I said, As evidence, we were their proof that the system was fair. Priya's face did very specific things in sequence. I watched her work through it. So they never intended for us to have real power, she said. I think they intended for us to be permanently almost powerful, I said. That is a different thing and a more useful one, for them. George Albright from his corner looked up. This was unusual. What do we do with that? I took the coffee, drank it, thought about the Hume who had filed my withdrawal number on their public channel within 40 minutes, who had said nothing publicly since, who had never in the 11 years I had been watching them appeared to be in a hurry. We talked to the Hume, I said. Colin blinked. The Hume don't talk. Everyone talks, I said. They just choose when. I opened a new channel on my personal comm, not back to Earth, not back to the Council. Direct narrowbeam addressed to the Hume delegation's private frequency, which I had obtained 3 years ago and never used. I typed 12 words. I think you have been waiting for someone to say that, so have I. I sent it. Then I finished my coffee and looked at the viewport one more time, where New Galveston had already moved past us, its lights fading into the distance behind the ship's hull, still there, still burning, still waiting to see what would happen next. I thought so am I. Then I went to find somewhere to sleep, because what was coming next was going to require me to be rested and awake and absolutely certain of what I was building before I started building it. I was only certain of one thing so far. The cork was out of the bottle. Everything after that was up to us. Part 4. The Hume responded in 11 minutes. Not with words, with a set of coordinates, a location in deep space, no station, no inhabited world, no council jurisdiction, a point in the dark between things. I told Colin to plot us a course. He looked at the coordinates for a long moment. There is nothing there, he said. That is why they chose it, I said. We arrived 18 hours later. Waiting at the coordinates was a Hume vessel I had never seen before, which was remarkable because I had studied every registered Hume ship class in the Council database. This one was not in the database. It was vast and dark, and moved with the slow patience of something that did not need to hurry because it had never, in its operational life, been late. A docking signal came through. No voice, just an open bay. I went alone. George made his feelings about this clear through the medium of standing very still and saying nothing. I went anyway. Inside the Hume vessel, a single figure waited. Old did not cover it. The Hume elder sat in a chamber lit by something warm and indirect, and when it spoke, the translator in my earpiece worked for a full 30 seconds before producing output. You left, it said finally. We have been watching humans sit in that room for 240 years. We thought you would leave after the first 50. We were patient, I said. You were afraid, it said. There is a difference. We know because we were afraid once. It was a very long time ago. It slid a document across the surface between us. Physical paper, actual paper, which I had not touched in years. The material was thick and pale and old in a way that felt less like age and more like deliberate preservation. This was written before the Council existed, the elder said. We have been carrying it for 430 years, waiting for a species that left the table without begging to come back to it. I looked at the document. The script was Old Hume, which I could not read. At the bottom, freshly added in a single glyph, was the symbol my translator had already told me meant finally. What is it? I said. A framework, the elder said. A different table, one we designed before we understood that the Verath would design the table we ended up at. I took the document carefully. Why didn't you use it? I said. We needed someone else to leave first. The first species to leave alone looks like a failure. The first species to leave and then build something new, the translator paused. That looks like a beginning. I flew back to the Corvin with a 400-year-old document in my bag and a very clear understanding that I was no longer running a withdrawal. I was running a construction project. The next 6 months were the most difficult work I had ever done, and the most alive I had ever felt, which is a combination that does not happen often enough in a single life. The first meeting of what would eventually become the Voss Accord. I did not name it that. I want to be absolutely clear about that. The name appeared in someone's report and spread before I could stop it, happened on the Corvin, in the common room, with 6 species represented. We sat around a folding table someone had dragged out of cargo storage. There was coffee, because I had insisted, and a Keth beverage that smelled like warm metal, and Priya had printed a paper agenda, because she believed that agendas printed on paper were taken more seriously than digital ones, and she was right. The 6 species were human, Huam, and 4 others, the Drev, the Lath, the Caloran, and the Tinhari, all of them small voices in the council, all of them with records that showed the same pattern, outvoted, outmaneuvered, adapted to, and thanked for their patience. I opened the meeting by saying that we were not forming a replacement council. I said it clearly twice, because I knew that, not a replacement council, was exactly what this was going to look like from the outside, and I wanted everyone in the room to know that I knew that and had thought about it. What we are forming, I said, is a structure where no species in this room will be the permanent one. No single member holds a veto. No single language becomes the procedural default. No platform is 11 centimeters lower than any other. I had not planned to say the 11 centimeters part. It came out anyway. The Tinhari delegate, a compact individual named Res, looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. Then she said, "How many centimeters lower was your platform?" 11, I said. A silence around the table, the kind that meant everyone was doing the same quiet calculation. "We were 14, said the Caloran delegate. 32, said the Lath. The Drev representative said nothing, just looked at his hands. I called the meeting to order. Over the following weeks, 3 things happened in parallel, which is how the most consequential things tend to happen. The framework grew, 9 species, then 12, then 14. We moved meetings every time, different ships, different stations, no fixed address, no council charter. Priya designed the rotation schedule. George managed security with his usual combination of thoroughness and minimal speech. Colin kept records in a cipher he invented himself, which was either brilliant or unnecessary and possibly both. The Galactic Council's response escalated in stages, each stage more revealing than the last. First, they issued formal sanctions, targeted at human trade routes, which was the lever they had always relied on. The difficulty was that human logistics networks had, over 240 years of council membership, become deeply embedded in galactic infrastructure. Rerouting cargo away from human-flagged ships to apply economic pressure turned out to also mean rerouting cargo away from the fastest and most reliable shipping in the outer rim, which created delays, which created complaints, which came from council member species. The sanctions lasted 6 weeks before 3 council members quietly asked for exemptions. Then came diplomatic pressure, formal communiques to every species that had joined our framework, describing the serious risks of participating in unauthorized multilateral arrangements. 2 species quietly asked me if they should be worried. I showed them the communiques, and then showed them their own records of council votes for the past 30 years. Neither of them left the framework. Then came the censure, a formal document signed by 14 council delegations, declaring that Earth's actions constituted a destabilizing breach of galactic diplomatic norms. It was serious language, legally crafted, carrying the full weight of council institutional authority. Priya framed it and hung it in the freighter bathroom. The crew voted on this. The vote was unanimous. The Drev were the problem I saw coming from the 3rd meeting, and said nothing about for too long. Their delegate was a man named Yuval, quiet, precise, with the careful manner of someone who was always counting something. He participated in every session. He voted correctly. He never missed a meeting. He was also, I discovered through an intercepted trade memo that Colin flagged on a Tuesday morning, communicating with the Verath Council block in detail. Not espionage, exactly. More like insurance. He was keeping a door open. I did not call a special session. I did not announce it to the group. I asked Yuval to meet me for coffee. We sat in the Corvin's common room, just the two of us, and I put the trade memo on the table between us. He looked at it for a long moment. He did not touch it. I grew up in a city, I said, where you learned very early which people would fold under pressure and which ones would simply become the pressure themselves. I never held it against the ones who folded. It is a reasonable response. But I need to know which one you are, because what we are building requires people who have decided. He sat with that. The Verath offered us 3 trade concessions, he said finally. Things the council denied us for 20 years. I know, I said. That is how you know they are worried. He looked up. They are buying you back, I said, because what we are building is worth more to them to stop than 3 trade concessions cost. That is useful information. It means we are doing something real. I picked up my coffee. But I cannot use you in this room if I am not sure where you are. Another long silence. What happens, he said carefully, if I tell you I am still deciding? Then I ask you to take some time outside the room until you have decided, I said, and I hold your seat open. It will be here when you are ready. He left that day. He came back 4 days later and handed me a formal written rejection of the Verath offer, signed, with a copy sent to the Verath Council block. He sat back down at the table. I poured him coffee. Owen Price called on a Thursday when I was reviewing shipping route data with Priya, and trying to avoid thinking about the fact that I had not slept more than 5 hours in 11 days. The Chicago colony vote came in, he said. I put down the route data and 91% support for the framework. I looked at the ceiling of the Corvin's common room, which needed a cleaning that it had not gotten in approximately 4 months. They are calling it the Voss Accord, Owen said. The name is in 3 major Earth papers this morning. I hate that, I said. I know, he said. So do the Verath. It is in their briefings. They have a full intelligence file now with your name on the front. I thought about that for a moment. Then I thought about 11 centimeters, about a clean, pleasant chime, about 400,000 people who had trusted the wrong table. Good, I said. Owen said nothing for a moment. Then, are you all right? It was a strange question, coming at that moment after everything. It was also the most human question anyone had asked me in 6 months. I am functional, I said. That is not what I asked. I know, I said. Give me 40 years and I will tell you. He laughed quietly and closed the channel. That evening, alone, I stood at the viewport for a long time. The censure document was visible from where I stood, framed on the bathroom door, 14 signatures, the full weight of Galactic institutional disapproval. I looked at it until it stopped meaning anything. That was the night I understood what the inside of power felt like. Not loud, not victorious, just a quiet shift in weight, like something that had been pressing on one side of a scale for a very long time had been matched, finally, by something pressing back. The Hume's 400-year-old document was in my bag. I took it out and read it again, using the translation Priya had finished the week before. It was not complicated. It was actually very simple. It said that power shared by many is the only power that lasts, and that any table built to tilt will eventually tilt enough to spill everything. I read it twice. Then I put it back carefully, zipped the bag, and went to tell George to plot us a course for the next meeting. There were 14 species sitting at a table, with no tilted platforms. There was a great deal of work left to do. Part 5. 2 years after I filed a withdrawal notice with no template, in a bathroom on Station Velareth, I sat in a small room in Geneva and answered questions for 4 hours. Not a trial, not a celebration, an oversight hearing of Earth's Joint Parliamentary Committee on Interstellar Affairs, which had the look of an event that had been scheduled 3 times before today and kept being pushed back because no one was fully certain what category to file it under. The committee had 14 members. They sat at a long, curved table. I sat at a smaller table facing them with Colin to my left and a glass of water I did not touch for the first hour. Senator Alan Marsh opened the session. He was a careful man, the kind who prepared his questions the evening before and revised them at breakfast. He thanked me for appearing. I said I was glad to be there. We were both being accurate. The first 2 hours were procedural, documentation, timelines, the legal basis for the withdrawal notice, the subsequent formation of the framework, the status of current trade agreements. Priya had prepared a complete briefing packet. It ran to 400 pages. I could see several committee members paging through it with the expression of people who would be assigning staff to read it. I answered every question directly. There was nothing in the record I was not willing to stand in front of. The difficult questions came in the 3rd hour, as they always do, when the committee has gotten comfortable and the formal structure begins to loosen at the edges. Senator Clara Novick, who represented a district that included Port Inns Colony, leaned forward in her chair. She was 53, had the precise diction of someone who had been underestimated in rooms like this one for decades, and had a question that was not on the prepared list. "Ambassador Voss," she said, "my constituents in Port Inns ask me regularly whether the framework will last, whether this is a permanent change or whether we will eventually end up back in the same position. What do I tell them?" I thought about the bakery, about New Galveston's lights from a distance. "Tell them that the framework has a structural principle that the Council never had," I said. "It was built specifically so that no species inside it can do to another what was done to us. The HUM helped design the original version 400 years ago, which means someone much older than us thought it through very carefully. That does not guarantee it lasts forever. Nothing does. But it was built by people who had already seen what happens when it fails." Clara Novick held my answer for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and wrote something down. Senator Alan Marsh came back in the 4th hour with the question I had been waiting for the entire session. "Ambassador," he said, "are you proud of what you did?" The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when everyone inside them knows they are at the center of the moment. I sat with the question. Proud? I turned the word over. Proud was the feeling you had when something finished the way you hoped it would, when the outcome was clean, when the cost was acceptable relative to the gain. Proud was a measuring tool for stories that had endings. This did not have an ending yet. "I do not think pride is the right instrument for measuring this," I said. "The right instrument is distance. Ask me again in 40 years. Marsh blinked. "That is not an answer." "It is the only honest one," I said. "What I did was correct. I am certain of that. Whether it was the best possible version of correct that requires time I do not have yet." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he wrote something down, which was what committee members did when they did not know how to respond to an answer but did not want to appear unprepared. The hearing ended at 16:40. Outside the committee chamber, in a narrow corridor with pale walls and the particular fluorescent light that exists only in government buildings, a young diplomat found me. She was 24. Her name badge said Kate Pryor. She had the face of someone who had not yet learned to keep things off it, which in diplomatic work meant she was either very new or very genuine, and she seemed like the kind of person where it was probably both. "Ambassador Voss," she said, catching up with me in 2 quick steps. "I am sorry, I am starting my posting next month, Outer Rim Station, and I wanted to ask." She stopped, reorganized, started again. "What was the most important thing you did?" she said. "In all of it, if there was one thing." Colin, walking 2 steps behind me, very carefully looked at a wall. I stopped walking. Kate Pryor looked at me with those open, unguarded eyes, waiting for something she could carry with her. something clean and usable and strong enough to hold weight. I thought about the vote chime, the clean, pleasant tone that had never once hesitated. I thought about the mirror in the bathroom on Velareth, and putting something down that I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it had weight. I thought about my hand on cold glass, looking at a grid of lights that did not know my name. I thought about a 400-year-old piece of paper. I thought about Yuval, sitting across from me, deciding to become the pressure instead of folding to it. I stopped performing patience, I said, for people who were counting on me to perform it forever. Everything after that was logistics. Kate Pryor held that for a moment. Then she nodded, carefully, like someone storing something in a place they would not forget. "Thank you," she said. I nodded back, then I kept walking. The Corvin was docked at Geneva's upper bay. I had kept the ship. This was, technically, a requisition overstay that someone in the budgetary office had been meaning to flag for 18 months. No one had. I suspected they had decided collectively not to. I went back to the common room. I sat down in the same chair where I had eaten reconstituted noodles the night after the withdrawal and watched 14 civilizations process their disbelief. The viewport was the same. The rattling at three-quarter thrust was the same. The smell of recycled air and the particular brand of noodle packet the crew favored was absolutely the same. The censure document was still on the bathroom door. 14 signatures. The full formal weight of a council that had needed us to stay small. I looked at it for a long time. When it had first gone up, I had found it funny. Then it had become wallpaper. Then I had looked at it on the night I understood what power felt like from inside, and it had meant something different. Now I looked at it and saw something else again, not a trophy, not a joke, not a warning. Just a document that told you exactly what 14 civilizations had been afraid of. They had been afraid of the right thing. Just for the wrong reasons. They had been afraid we would leave because it would create instability. What they should have been afraid of was what we would build after. I did not take it down. Some things belong on walls. The Galactic Council still existed. 2 years on, it was smaller. 3 member species had quietly moved their primary diplomatic presence to the framework's channels while maintaining nominal council seats, which was a political maneuver so transparently cautious it was almost charming. The council had restructured twice, issued 4 new frameworks for interim trade that bore a strong structural resemblance to documents that Priya had written and published 6 months prior, and had promoted Velsaris to a new senior position that seemed to involve traveling extensively to places where she was not immediately connected to anything that had gone wrong. The Outer Rim resource conflicts that SSK Thuris had described, the ones that the human presence had been papering over for 30 years, had not materialized into open conflict. The Shari had taken credit for this. I had let them. There was a version of peace that required someone to take credit, and the best versions were the ones where you did not need it to be you. SSK Thuris himself had sent a private message 8 months ago. No council letterhead, personal. It said 3 sentences. The table you built is not what we expected. I am not certain what we expected. I think perhaps that is the point. I had read it 3 times. I had not replied. Some things did not need replies. Colin knocked on the frame of the common room door. "Secretary General is holding the channel," he said, "and there is a priority relay from Ress at the Tinhari station." "Tell Owen I will call him back in 20 minutes, I said. "Put Ress through." Ress's voice came over the speaker, direct, economical, carrying the slight harmonic that Tinhari used when they were delivering something they considered significant. "The Huam sent a secondary document," she said, "separate from the first, older. They are calling it a companion piece." A pause. "It has signatures from 9 species on it. None of them are in the council. None of them exist anymore." I sat very still. 9 species, I said. "All pre-council." The Huam's translation note says this document was used once before, in a different cycle, a different arrangement. And then the arrangement was her translator worked for a moment, absorbed, into what became the council. I understood what she was telling me. This had been tried before, 400 years ago. The Hume had designed a different table, tried to build a different arrangement, and the council had absorbed it before it had grown large enough to hold its own weight. This time, the Hume had waited for someone to leave first. This time, they had given the document to someone who had already gone. "Thank you, Res," I said. "Schedule a full session. I want everyone on that call." I closed the channel. Outside the viewport, the stars were where they always were. Different coordinates now, Geneva's upper orbit, close enough to see the blue curve of Earth below, the lights of the northern hemisphere scattered across the dark like a reflection of the stars above. I pressed my hand against the glass. It was cold. I left it there until the cold was a steady ache, the way I had learned to do at New Galveston's viewport 2 years ago. A practice, a small, private accounting, a way of measuring what mattered by how long you were willing to hold it. Then I picked up my comm. I had a message from my mother in Chicago, still unanswered, 2 years and 3 months old. It sat at the top of my personal queue where it had been since the night after I filed the withdrawal notice, waiting with the patience of something that did not need to demand attention to retain it. I opened it. I did not read it again. I knew what it said. I typed 4 words. "Coming home, save some." I sent it before I could think about it too much. Then I closed the personal queue and opened the work channel, because there was a session to schedule and a 9-species pre-council document to review and a construction project that was 2 years in and nowhere near finished. I looked out the viewport one last time. Earth below, blue and white and spinning with the absolute indifference of a planet that had been here long before any of us and would be here long after, getting on with its rotation, regardless of what its inhabitants were doing aboard a freighter in its own upper orbit. 14 civilizations out there in the dark, still trying to figure out what humans were going to do next. George appeared in the doorway with a coffee. He set it on the table without being asked, which meant Colin had briefed him. George knew the difference between the coffee that was a formality and the coffee that meant we were about to do something significant. This was the second kind. I took it. "Plot us a course for Tinhari Station," I said. "Already done," said George. I looked at him. "Colin told me about the document," he said. And then, because George said things rarely and therefore when he said them they landed with more weight than most people could manage, he added, "We were always going to end up here. You just had to leave first." I drank the coffee. Outside, the stars did not move. They burned the way they always had, steady, indifferent, older than every government any of us had ever built. Everything out, they're still trying to figure out what humans do next. So were we. But for the first time in a very long time, we were the ones asking the question, not the ones being asked. And that, I decided, as the Corvin's engines came to life beneath me and the course locked in and Earth fell slowly behind the viewport, was enough. For now, it was enough.